Truth Frequency Radio Network. KTFRN. Worldwide.
Hola, this is Sienna inviting you to join me tonight as we navigate through the seen and the unseen, explore external and internal realities, expose on-world and off-world agendas, discover a path to joy and freedom. Now, join me as we illuminate the Shadowland and reclaim our birthright as free and sovereign beings. Good evening, everyone. This is Sienna and I am here tonight with Jack Reed of Community Planet. This is part 2. We did last Friday's show with Jack, and I am really excited to have you on the show tonight. Welcome, Jack.
It's good to be here again.
Yes. I'm particularly thrilled to have you here because I feel that you're somebody that truly walks your talk, that's been holding a Community Planet vision for a very long time and have been living and breathing it, and it feels like it's very close to manifestation in my psychic sensing of the situation. And I think it's incredibly needed right now in so many ways. And I'd like to talk a little bit about socialism and communism. You mentioned in the last hour that democracy and the republic and all of the models that we've used to organize ourselves with high values of serving the whole actually have had other agendas tied to them. Can you explain that a little bit to us?
Well, I think historically that people in power tend to want to stay in power, and there's that saying about how power corrupts. But people have said that democracy is very different from communism or socialism, and that we have a democracy, and yet what we have here in the United States certainly does not fit the definition of democracy. Well, it's actually a republic, supposed to be a republic, but there's some quotes in the book, for instance, from one of the Supreme Court justices who says that we don't have a one-man, one-vote system. And after they had this Citizens United decision here that the Supreme Court approved, it's that corporations have the rights of individuals. So most of these elections get decided most of the time by who has the most money. For instance, here in California, there was an initiative on the ballot about labeling GMO foods so the consumers would know which foods were labeled and which weren't, and or which foods were GMO and which ones were not. And the big ag business put so much money into that, and with so many misleading commercials. I mean, they were jokes. They were so misleading, but it was enough to to totally turn public opinion, because it's hard to be an informed person as a citizen. One would need a full-time staff working for them, investigating everything to really be a responsible citizen in this era of complexity. And Gandhi said it, and that quote's in the book again, is that he said something like he did not believe in majority rules decision-making because, in the face of it, it just means that 51% can dictate to the other 49%. And this has happened so often that that everybody just basically sees themselves as a part of the minority, and where they're not getting their opinions heard, and they're not getting served, and so they talk about this whole Republican Democrat thing and people taking up decisions, and they can't make quality decisions because they have to go into like ridiculous compromises about things because people are trying to represent their uninformed constituency who couldn't identify Iraq on a map, and you know, to try and get reelected. So, you know, there's an email that was going around about the definition of fascism, and there was 10 things that represented what fascism was, and of those 10 things, the United States at this point was doing all of them. So, you know, until we get to a place where we're willing to totally change the paradigm and to one based on the highest good for all, we're always going to have these centralized power-based systems that are based on people who have the resources to be in control can get these decisions hammered through for them. But I have another thing that I say, and that is it's easy to be a critic. It's easy for people to, because there's so much wrong. It's so much that's not working. So being a critic is the easiest thing in the world, but coming up with real solutions to all these interconnected problems, that's really what's needed. So I don't focus on being a critic. I mean, sure, part of my consciousness would like to go there because it's easy, and it's you know, to hammer away at these things. And but you know, I need to spend all my life force and energy into presenting a solution. And so I'll just opt out for now of being critical about the current systems, because anybody who's really thinking about these things and is aware of what's going on knows that what's happening not just here in the United States, but all over the world, it's just not working for people on the planet and for life on the planet also, because we can't forget what's happening to, you know, the environment and all the other living creatures on the planet.
Yes, absolutely. And we only have our own life force at the end of the day. You know, here at Truth Frequency, we have lots and lots of shows that are exposing. We have lots of whistleblowers. We are, you know, the veil is getting lifted, and we're seeing the level of corruption, and we're seeing the level of the dominator culture and the abuses. And we do need to have a look at it. But at a certain point, we have a choice of where we're going to put our energy one moment after another. And that's all we have.
Yes, and I want to add that I've got nothing against, as a matter of fact, I support all those people who are whistleblowers and all the people who are trying to shine the light on these things that are not working. And that's what they're here to do, and that's what they need to be doing. But for those of us who can see a solution that would address all the interconnected problems, that's what we need to be doing, is to focus on the solution while these other people shine the light into the darkness in other areas.
Yeah, and also everybody is deeply wounded by this level of dominator culture. The hierarchical control grid has invalidated and made less than and traumatized all of humanity. And so addressing the issue of how are we going to create something new without, nests, nurturing places where we can heal in the process. And that's why I love Community Planet, and because you are creating a place where people can be nurtured and be supported in shedding the the armoring that we all have, and the closed and the shut downness, and here at Illuminating the Shadowland, we go deep into these shadow aspects, and there's so many layers of, alien interference and subpersonalities, and it's very, very complex what the human psyche has contracted to simply survive the level of horror that we've all been a part of. So community is a natural, organic outpouring for solution. And so I really am interested in hearing how you're envisioning this more, the actual design process. You had mentioned that you have 12, I don't know what you call them, and Tamara, they call them pillars, because obviously you're not functioning from a hierarchical structure. So what kind of a structure are you functioning from? How do they interrelate without dominating, without there being people who tell other people what to do and this sort of thing?
Well, we had 12 descriptive areas that are, and there's an interesting story behind that, is that when I first put together this class with another person in terms of looking at how we would make this description, because I had carried this idealized description around in my head for a couple of decades before I finally got that we had to describe this in very concrete terms rather than the idealized description, because we wouldn't know what we were all talking about, that we had the same vision unless we really described it. So I thought we would do things like the economy, the governance, and health care and food production and some of those kinds of questions. And the class immediately rebelled and said, that's the way people typically think about these things. That's the boring way to conceptualize this. We need to ask more interesting questions.
Right.
So we came up with a series of 12 questions that described how the community would look and how it would work. And so in the book, this comes under the subchapter of it's important what questions we ask. The first one was, instead of dealing with the issue of economy in terms of how it relates to the people within the community, our question was, how do we share our abundance? And as we were talking about in the last week with the interview, I was talking about how people within the community own the entire community rather than individual lots or houses. And in sharing, we came up with a quote that we need to redefine wealth as use and access rather than possession.
Beautiful.
Because people can have, through sharing, so much more. In a community of, say, 500 people, where it's a pedestrian community within the community, and people can share resources and share vehicles, and how often do people need to go outside the community to do other things? Well, sure, it's important that we can do that, but how many cars do we actually need? Here, now, it's basically one car per adult.
Yeah.
And it's an incredible waste. In a community of 500 people, we only need probably 30 cars total, 30 vehicles and different types of vehicles so that people can use them for various things. But most of the time, my vehicle just sits in the driveway. It's used a fraction of the time. And a lot of our resources are used a fraction of the time. Here in Santa Barbara, we have any number of boats that are down in the harbor, which are private boats, and if people aren't living on those boats, how often do they actually take those boats out? You know, the community could have whatever is needed if there's a boat. We don't need a tennis court in our backyard or a swimming pool in our backyard. The community can have these things. And we don't need to spend all the kind of money on these things that people spend if we just have access to these things where we can share. And anything that people want to do within the community, we can create access to those things so that it's available for anybody who wants to partake of that. So that's how we're looking at this area of economy, and why we described it as how do we share our abundance.
Well, you just think about the level of waste that we all are participating in, which brings me to what are you going to do about garbage and waste and sanitation? And do you have a plan for all of that kind of thing? Are you going to be...
I'm glad you touched on that, because that's another one of my pet peeves. Here in Santa Barbara, I walk a lot to go various places. And as I walk around, sometimes I just start picking up trash that's there. And they're trying to do this ban on plastic bags. They may have, in fact, done it, and which I have nothing against, but it's all the consumerism packaging that I see and frequently pick up that's all over the city. It's all these little pieces of plastic that are all over the place and you know, I don't care so much about paper because eventually a lot of that will biodegrade, but plastic doesn't. And within the community, we can, you know, instead of buying all this stuff, a lot of this that we don't need, because people are just consuming a lot of fast foods and nonsense kind of products, and we won't. Straws are another one. Straws are just... I just had a visitor here the other day who bought a book, and she worked with the oceans of the world, and she saw that they were saying that fish farming all over the world and people catching fish, the stocks of the fish are just disappearing because of the overfishing and because of people, the fishermen, trying to survive on their own because they need to go out there and make their daily catch to support their families. But in the process, they're ruining their livelihoods and the livelihoods for other fishermen because the fish in the sea just need to be caught differently, and they need to restock because otherwise we're wiping out the fish. And in terms of packaging, there's an area out in the Pacific, and I understand there's vortexes in all the oceans of the world where they just have these garbage patches out there that go down sometimes 20 feet below the surface. There's this Texas-sized area in the Pacific. I would assume that most of your informed listeners know this kind of stuff, but it's called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And for the sailors who sail through this, their lives are changed forever when they see how much plastic is out there.
Yes.
A vortex that keeps circling the size of Texas, and the fish and the fowl keep eating this stuff, and then we get to eat it because it comes back to us as we're the consumers of these fish that have swallowed all this plastic. So it's just incredibly nonsensical what's being done in the consumerism society. And in terms of how do we share our abundance, we can just simply choose to do things far differently than are being done right now, which will make it not only more abundant for the people living locally, but it will be good for the environment as a whole. And then you talked about garbage. We're simply going to have to have far less garbage, and there's ways of, even when there's pieces of plastic, there's ways of turning those plastics back into oil and potentially into energy, so that we put nothing into landfills. There's the technology available where we can put absolutely nothing into the landfills. There's technology available and is practiced in places in the world where all the sewer can be transformed back into water that's even drinkable water. There's the technology available to do these things. It's hard to do when we're trying to retrofit existing communities, but when we're designing these model communities with the end in mind and with all these systems in mind before we go in and start building things, then we can create these kinds of closed systems so that this community will be totally non-polluting.
Absolutely. And, we talk a lot about sovereignty on here and personal freedom. And I don't think that there's going to be any way to really retrieve who we are when we're living in a abusive way with our mother planet. I mean, it's really just that. And we don't need to go on a guilt trip about it, because plugging into the artificial construct, the matrix as it is, there's no way to avoid it. You're just a polluter. You're just a part of this huge issue in everything you do. And it's a very beautiful thing. And these are the hard choices and the beautiful choices that each human being can make to take his or her life force and go, no more. It stops here with me. What I'm going to do is to support and heal and recycle and replenish and nurture and heal. And this allows the soul to heal, in my opinion, as well. It's an essential part of the internal healing process. I mean, my life work has been in psychology and in helping with the deep inner processes of healing, integrating the shadow. But the level of shame and feeling not good about oneself, it can't just be healed sitting in a room holding your inner child. You have to actually get on with a life that you can feel good about. And I think that the kind of model you're presenting would allow that kind of healing for human beings, and it would be paramount. I mean, what a life change to be a part of something that was doing no harm. And every level, which is, it seems like your community is based on the highest good of all, but I like the phrase doing no harm, because it seems that we get in our car. I mean, we're polluting the environment. Everything we're doing, we're part of this monster of self-servingness that makes one feel horrible about oneself at the end of the day. Or you just go numb and dissociate from the whole thing and act like, well, I can't do anything else. But the fact is, and you're pointing it out so beautifully, yes, we can. And yes, we can. And I mean, I know I live in Ecuador. There are people in these hills here that have left the United States, that are creating permaculture farms, that are creating sustainable systems, that are recycle, everything you're talking about. People who have uprooted their lives, who have cut their ties with all of that, these people are ecstatic. They have huge smiles on their face. They are so in love with life. They are so vital and alive in working with the life-sustaining model. It's an incredible thing to behold.
Yep, and as I said in the foreword to the book, as I wrote in the foreword to the book, if I was, when I say this, I'm not judging what other people have done, because their path may be different than mine. But if I didn't have this vision of how we could transform the world, I would have long ago gone someplace on a tropical area and just body surfed myself.
Yeah.
And raised an organic garden and just hung out there on the beach. But I can't do that, because we've got to change things for people. And I'm glad you brought up the point about personal freedom too, because people sometimes, when they listen to this kind of a cooperative model, they think, well, I don't want to sacrifice my personal freedom. And actually living in the kind of society that we're living in now with the current paradigm, people are giving up their personal freedoms all the time, but because everybody is kind of doing it collectively, they don't see it as giving up their personal freedoms, versus living in a cooperative community where people are making decisions using consensus, to where people take back the control over the decisions in their everyday lives. So this will be, in terms of personal empowerment and personal freedom, these kinds of cooperative communities will allow them an amazing amount more of personal freedom. But we're not going to have that at the expense of anybody else, but we're going to have everybody come along in the same direction so that everybody gets to experience more personal freedom. But in the part of that, let us realize that we're all connected and that we can make this work for everyone.
Well, that's the thing. We are all connected, and none of us are going to be free unless we participate in liberating each other and holding a space for each other. There is no way. Freedom involves radical self-responsibility. They go together. We're going to break right now, Jack. Thank you so much. Stay with us. We're going to dive deeper into Community Planet when we return. Welcome back, everyone. This is Sienna with Illuminating the Shadowland, and I'm here with my guest tonight, Jack Reed, founder of the Community Planet Project. Okay, in our remaining half hour, I would really like to dive into structure a bit and consensus. I'm fascinated by consensus, because getting everybody to agree on something seems unfathomable to me. How do you do that?
Well, again, as I said last week, the key is to have people holding that consciousness of the highest good for all. And another key is to have everybody take responsibility for the entire group, because it's easy for us to fall out of, in our communication, to take up issue with somebody else or to observe something that's going on in the group and to just say, well, I hope somebody else takes care of that. But what we do is we ask all people in the group, to take complete responsibility for everything that's happening in the group. Because so oftentimes when something goes amiss, we say, well, it was this person's fault, or the leader didn't run a good meeting, or whatever. It's everybody take responsibility, because there's something that everybody can do. And the person who may be doing the most for a group of people might be a person who's just sitting there, being completely present, smiling, and putting their loving into the room so that people can palpably feel that contribution from the person. And another person may be, just as I said last week, just accessing their intuition to just know that there's something more, something different that needs to take place.
Well, this really sounds like an environment where people could really evolve out of this survival of the fittest mentality and out of the ego, because we talk a lot on this show about the ego being a huge aspect of the shadow. And it seems to me that a project like this, where everybody is involved in asking the deepest questions about, and I have this whole list of questions. I could read this out, or maybe you want, because it's fabulous, because everybody becomes involved in the health and sustainability and enrichment and abundance and expansion of everybody. And in that way, in that exercise, in that focus, in that sadhana, in that discipline, the self-transformation would just be infinite.
Yes.
Which is the whole point, because how are we going to come out of this reptilian survival brain mode when it's all that is everywhere around us? So do you have those 12 questions? I've actually got them written down myself. So
Sure, but I wanted to say one more thing about consensus is that the way we've designed it, because how does one work consensus for some community decisions based on 500 people? And we spent weeks and weeks designing that system. I wouldn't even try and give it in briefly because it's described in detail in the book how we would do this. But part of it also is that we wouldn't have groups of more than 12 people trying to do consensus, because then it just gets too hard for people to be able to participate in the decision making. But we described a way of how groups could meet and in groups of 12 and make decisions for the community. And then there's two different groups of two different consensus circles. One is what we call the essence hubs, which is just a group of people who want to get together on a weekly basis and talk about what's going on in their lives and talk about what's going on in the community and just that sharing, so that people know that they've got a support system for whatever is going on for them. And this not only benefits the community in terms of looking at the community and the key decisions that have to be made within the community, but it's also that, there's an epidemic of people who, through their separation, do harm to themselves. When there's a support system of people around people where they're really deeply connecting with other people, I can't imagine that there would be anything like that would happen in the community. And then there's a whole other group of the groups that people would be in, which are these 12 questions that describe the community. And we call those the focused hubs, so that everybody in the community, according to what they do to make a contribution of the community, is involved with one of those hubs. Like, for instance, if a person is involved with food production, they'd be in the focus, one of the focus hubs of how do we nurture ourselves. And if the person is involved with health care, they'd be in one of the focus hubs that have to do with how do we vitalize ourselves. If they're in any component of education or the community communication system, it would be how do we communicate with each other. Education, actually, no, that's not true. Education is how do we bring forth our inner wisdom? Because so often education now is how do we teach you what we want you to know, rather than how do we teach you to access that inner wisdom that each of us has inside of ourselves. If a person is involved with the energy creation in the community, that's and this is the second question in the book, is how do we interact with our environment? And about that, I'd like to say that when they're talking about alternative energy, I mean, sure, we can have alternative sources of energy in terms of wind power, solar power, whatever. But there's actually people who've created what's called zero-point energy systems or free energy systems. This technology has been suppressed. If one knows where to look for these things, they can find them. And there's all sorts of those kinds of things that need to be birthed to take care of the planet. Nikola Tesla had a way of doing it over 100 years ago, but they stopped him from doing it. There's any number of people who know how to do these things now, and whereas the community may not be able to do that at first, there's people like Stephen Greer who's putting together a group of people where they're actually focusing on bringing forward these kinds of technologies. So hopefully his group is going to be able to do that. But there's any number of people who are doing these kinds of things. The community will be it'll be a place where it'll be kind of like an Epcot center where people come in and can see how things can be built. It'll be a place where educational universities will come and study these all kinds of alternatives so they can spread this information and get it out all over the planet. There's another hub group that's one of the 12 areas that's called How Do We Expand Our Community? And this group not only has the responsibility of screening people to see that they hold the consciousness of the highest good and to train people in consensus decision making to become residents in the community, but they also have the responsibility of getting the community vision out all over the planet so that people can see it, so they can be replicated all over the planet and change this paradigm that we're living in. So I haven't touched on all of the 12 areas, but I just kind of got on a little roll there, and I described some of them. I could go and read the others, too.
Yeah, and what I really like about the areas is that they're questions. So instead of telling people that you have all the answers and you've figured all this out, and now they have to implement it, it looks to me like it's a process of discovery among the people who are present through the questioning process, which I really like because that's a safeguard against hierarchy and authority, because most of the communities that I have ever seen have the best intentions, but there are insidious layers of manipulation that haven't been cleared in the shadow aspects of the person or in the collective psyche, and they always rear their ugly head. But if people are allowed to really emerge with their own creativity, with their own knowing, as you said, and if you can safeguard that process to keep flowing, which is very challenging to do, you could have a fighting chance at allowing the new to birth and to keep birthing. So I really like your questions, and I would like to hear a few more of the questions.
Yes, and I'm glad you tuned in on that too, because that's exactly why we asked put them in the form of questions, is to make them open-ended, to always leave open the door that we can be more creative, and that what we described here may not be the be-all, end-all of it. We're just constantly looking at it evolving into something that might be even better. So I just want to touch on the, because healthcare in this country, I laugh because there's...
Oh, my God. No kidding.
In this country, they're obsessed with the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare as they call it, in all the taking it up as a political issue and using it to club each other over the heads with. And in a cooperative community as such as we've designed, healthcare would be free for everybody within the community. So that settles the whole thing. And when we focus on preventative healthcare and we focus on people being able to live in clean, pollution-free environments and to address situations before they come up, to have experts and not only experts in nutrition, but experts who can work with people, because so much disease comes out of mental, emotional issues, that they can work with people about those kinds of things, but not make it to where people have to say, well, I'm just going to live with this because I can't afford to go to a doctor right now.
Yeah.
Within the community, people can access this kind of health care anytime. And living in a fun-filled, a stress-free environment, the people living in this community will have far less stressors and be much more healthy and need health care. In fact, even though it's more available, they'll need it less, just because of the lifestyle that's going to be available within the communities. So healthcare will be one of the big pluses of living in this community, and it's just a system gone bad here in our country.
How are you going to handle the financial piece? I mean, how are you going to trade? Are you going to do barter? Are you going to have your own alternative currency? How are you going to handle all of that?
Well, within the community, there's no currency won't do anything for you, because there's nothing that costs any money unless you're visiting. But for people who are residents, there's no financial exchange necessary within the community. But in terms of dealing with how the community itself enriches itself, the question is, how do we enrich ourselves? And communities can provide services and products that are necessary for the world, for other places in the world. So eventually, as we transform the entire planet into cooperative communities, there will simply be communities who provide things that other communities may need, because not every community is going to be able to, create everything that it needs. Like, for instance, computers or any number of things. Let's say vehicles, airplanes. There are communities and then clusters of communities that can create all these kinds of things for the benefit of the entire planet. So in these first communities, they will simply be providing goods and services that are essential to share with the surrounding areas. For instance, our partners, one community which has an area that they're looking at, not only looking at, but they're in the process of being able to purchase, and they have, for that area that they're in, they have something that they're going to be producing that's going to be able to provide the ongoing funding for the operation of the community. So some communities will be like ski resorts, where people, that's their job, is to have people come in as visitors and from other communities around the planet, and they run these ski resorts. There'll be people who clusters of communities that their big job is going to be to operate airports. These things can all be done cooperatively, and we described in one of the chapters how the world itself can be set up to do these things in a cooperative manner to make life work for everyone.
Oh, so it's not people just going off into the wop-wops and living in their utopian way at all. You're seeing this.
No, not at all. There's kind of a back to nature poverty trip idea of communes that existed in the 60s and the 70s when people were doing that, and that's not at all what we're doing. We're embracing technology. Jacques Fresco with the Venus Project, I've visited him down in Florida, and they have a way of doing this in something that he describes as a resource-based economy. The piece I think they're missing is the consciousness piece to do that, and the consensus decision-making piece. But yeah, we can embrace technology, and we can. One of the reasons why that's not being done now is because, and one of the reasons why we don't have free energy right now is because the companies that provide the energy are, well, how can we make a profit out of this? That's why we're still based on a fossil fuels economy. Is if they could figure out a way to make the same amount of money off of providing free energy, we would have had that a long time ago, and the planet would have been in much better shape than it's in now. So
Definitely.
with these communities, we're going to be able to do those kinds of things.
Do you talk at all about gender balance or gender equality or healing relationships as a core of your work?
We don't specifically get into that, and yet if that's an issue for any individual, and if that's an issue for groups, then we will definitely get into that. Like when I've done team building with corporations, after I do about 3 group challenges with them, I can pretty much tell if there's a gender issue happening within the group. And the beauty of doing that in a different setting is they'll be able to see it much more clearly, and then we'll talk about how they have the same kind of culture within the workforce. When we do consensus decision making, if we see some gender issues going on there within the group, we'll absolutely bring that out and address it. So it is something that's happening in our culture. It's not happening across the board with every single individual, but if it's anything that needs to be addressed, we will address it. And gender equality, of course, is one of those issues that a lot of people have grown up with. I don't know if I was telling you this before, but I grew up in a family where it was pretty much of a matriarchal society here within our family. So I always came to look at people as people, but I'll see gender issues if they're there, and we will address them if they're there.
And what about sexuality? Does your community support different sexual lifestyles, or live and let live, or polyamory, or it's not on the table?
I don't think we need to get into dictating how people go about their lives. One thing we would like to have is that, although different communities could be different, and some communities could do this, but we would want to be in these first communities to be drug-free communities and smoke-free communities. But in terms of individuals' preferences, and even religious preferences for that matter, as long as people do not try and run their preferences on other people so that it negatively impacts other people's lives, then I don't know that there's an issue we have with it.
Cool. All right, we only have 3 more minutes left. So my question would be, how can we support you and Community Planet in this project and in your development?
The first thing to do would be to go to the www.communityplanet.org. That's communityplanet.org, and look at the video there. Contact us. Order the book if you want more detail on what we've been talking about, and also I can then plug you into our friends at One Community because their website is so expansive that one can go in there and literally spend weeks seeing what they've done, because in terms of describing that community and how they're going to build it, they are further along in their description than we are, and we work closely with them. They're our partners, and so.
So people can join. Are you looking for volunteers? How do people participate? If somebody's interested in exploring this model, how would they?
Well, if they contact me, I can plug them in. So go to communityplanet.org and hit the contact and say you're interested in participating. Tell us where you live, and then I can turn you on to the One Community site, and because they're looking for people to participate right now in designing and building what they have going there. They've got a piece of property identified, so it's much easier to work from that basis, and so contact us.
Fantastic. And are you looking for specific skills and sets and this sort of thing, or do people need?
In the newsletter that Community Planet just sent out, we and you can also join our newsletter list. But in that newsletter that we just put out, there's a list of what One Community is looking for right now. But that's a specific list that they need to handle a couple of things that they're looking at. But, anybody can come and participate.
Oh, beautiful. Well, I'm getting some feedback now. Did something change?
Nothing changed here.
Okay. I don't know what that's about. All right. Well, this has been an incredible journey. Community Planet offers a beautiful opportunity for people who want to really align themselves with solution and with living in a harmony with life instead of being part of the problem. So I would just thank you for all. I know you've lived and breathed this vision for such a very long time. Bless you, Jack. I can feel what a big heart you have for this. And let's get this community happening.
Let's get it happening.
Let's get it on.
Okay.
Community Planet. Thank you, Jack Reed. Good night, everyone.
My pleasure.